Good afternoon on what is a warm, grey and humid day. It is Monday the 12th of June. I've got a nice hot cup of tea. And a box to continue unboxing. So I have already pulled out on here the Gamma Quadrant for Star Trek Adventures and this big doorstepper, Everyday Heroes from Evil Genius Games. And next I have Cthulhu Confidential from Pelgrane Press. This is based on the GUMSHOE One-2-One system by Robin D. Laws. Now, the GUMSHOE system is a system specifically designed to facilitate investigative role-playing games, and it's seen it's been used in a wide variety of different genres. Including time travel. Mutant City Blues, for example, is an investigative superheroes role-playing game where you play members of the police who have mutant powers but contract mutant powers through through their use, or the most famous, of course, is Trail of Cthulhu, which is Pelgrane Press's Lovecraftian investigative role-playing game designed by Ken Hite. But this is really an extension of that. So, one player, one game master, double the thrills. Want to plunge into Lovecraftian mystery without the need for a gaming group? Want to introduce a friend or loved one to a role-playing hobby? Cthulhu Confidential has to come to your rescue. Cthulhu Confidential, it reimagines GUMSHOE, the classic rules of investigative adventure, for the excitement and intensity of head-to-head play. Combine the darkness of the 90s of the 30s, it's hardboiled detective fiction with the cosmic horror of Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos. Cthulhu Confidential features dauntless, ready-to-play investigators, hardboiled private eye Dex Raymond, crusading journalist Vivian Sinclair, scholarly veteran Langston Wright, terrifying settings torn from the scandal sheets and forbidden grimoires. 1937 Los Angeles, its streets dark with something more than the night. 1935 New York City, that roaring town, and Egypt inside out. Wartime Washington DC, a sleeping Goliath soon to awake. 3 full-length thrilling scenarios: Family Sleep, a spiral into memory unspeakable. Fractal frequencies, illuminated by a light that cannot be seen. Capital Colour, a mystery of meteoric impact. Also featuring the complete GUMSHOE One-to-One rule system, full support for creating your own one-to-one adventures, guidance for online play. Will give you the tools you need to face the malign influence of the mythos alone. But will it be enough? Find out with Cthulhu Confidential. Being alone and terrified has never been so much fun. So, the thing is, you're typical. There is nothing to stop you playing a one-and-one game using the GUMSHOE system, but it's not quite facilitated for that because you tend to share a range of skills and in particular investigative skills. You might be specialist in one particular aspect of history. Another character might be a forensics expert, that sort of thing. You both have investigative abilities and have essentially points which you can spend to gain extra clues, but in your specialities. Cthulhu Confidential looks at that and says, how can we make the GUMSHOE system suitable for one player and one game master? So we open up and got a table of contents, the playtesters, and getting started with your investigation. And it comes with the advice: expect intensity. And that's the point, because essentially, if you're playing a one-on-one game, the emphasis is all upon you. You're the one, as the player, engaging with and experiencing this intensity of any situation. Whether that's interaction with a foil or, facing down a monster about to kill you. So very quickly, we get into explaining what the characters look like. So you've got a character card for Vivian Sinclair. and choosing your first adventure, studying your starting problem and using investigative problems. We've got a full list of the investigative abilities on the next page, and all the definitions that follow. So this is, you know, it's black and white, but it's very clearly presented, very easy to read, looks clean and tidy. And then we have general abilities. These are abilities that anybody have, rather than your investigative abilities, which come from your occupation. So after an explanation of those, we have tests. And tests are essentially what you do in order to overcome challenges, whether, you know, that's spending points from your general pool, or, you know, your dice, you know, rolling dice for general abilities, or spending points for your investigative abilities. Let's see, and then handling problems and edges, which you gain as you play. Essentially, we've got an example of play there, how to handle it in play. You know, situations like a car wreck. So it's you're reading through this, looking at the rules. It's supported by examples and so on. Then we have a Cthulhu for the uninitiated, an explanation of the Cthulhu mythos. You know, with its themes and motives, secret truth, knowledge brings doom. You're not who you think you are, strange aeons and so on. Before looking at the gods of indifference, it's nicely. Nice analysis and presentation of the mythos in clear, simple to understand fashion. So we look at the various gods, the major monsters and aliens, because you don't really need, you know, all of them. If you want all of them, there's the Monstrous Monstrum for Call of Cthulhu, or even, you know, there's a whole lot more in the Trail of Cthulhu rulebook. And then quick overview of Dread Tomes, essentially the mythos tomes, which contain details of these gods, aliens and monsters. GM advice on gaming 1-to-1. You know, so just general advice and things like you know, running challenges, handling threatening sources, and then creating investigators and scenarios. Setting up the introductory scene, challenges, and a table of options there, challenge difficulty table, designing edges and problems, and essentially the things that we'll encounter, which will, you know, the investigator will face. And then we have a stability challenge. Table stability is essentially a measure of your mental well-being as you encounter the mythos. We look at sample challenges by ability. So more examples, readily, easily, and clearly placed. Actually, quite a few pages of them, in fact. So that's quite impressive. So essentially, look, here are the simple situations. How to, you know, how to do this. You know, for example, pocket the idol, escape the Shoggoth, stay on the road, fix the radio, seal the cave entrance, brandish an elder sign, or even recover ancestral memory. There are rules in here, or guidance on handling those situations. Designing antagonist reactions, handling lucky breaks, and the emotional coda of investigation. And at this point, I'm going to take another break because I need more tea. And I do apologise, but it can't be avoided because I'm out in the Nook and it's summer and hay fever. So, moving swiftly on, as they say. So, and things like, you know, so notice Brown Jenkin, or tailing the one-armed guy, sneaking into the evidence room. Great coverage of those, and then we get into Hardboard LA, and Dex Raymond is your archetype for that story. So we've got his complete stats. You know, kind of classic hardball setting, NPCs. You know, in discussion, does Dex have to be a straight white guy? No, of course he doesn't. And there's essentially a section, you know, addressing that you know. But I mean, that's the archetype, isn't it? You know. So numerous NPCs with some really nice portraits, and a section on lingo for the setting. You know, Bindlestiff, victim of a fatal heroin overdose. You know, footwork shadowing someone on foot. Select bibliography. You know, which includes James Elroy, James M. Cain, Walter Mosley. Got you know, movies like Kiss Me Deadly, Chinatown, and so on are all absolutely perfect for that genre. And then a discussion of Hardboard LA as a setting. People, gangsters, cops, and other politicians. You've got a psychogeography, sort of like a guide to the area, and it's sort of like its mythical, almost magical resonance, with a map going through the various regions of LA in 1937. And then we get into the Fathomless Sleep, which is the scenario. Timeline of past events. So I'll just flip for that because you don't want. I'm not going to spoil all the scenarios because he's going to. So it's just flipping forward because I'm not going to show you all the scenarios before we get on to. And you've got things in here. The back for the scenario, you do have problem cards, and you know, which you're gonna you know, place in front of the player character as he explores the case. Fathomless Sleep edge cards as well, advantages. Before we have Hardboiled New York featuring Vivian Sinclair, and it's going to do exactly the same here. So notably, you know, lady detective, not femme fatale. And this is investigative abilities and gender in the 1930s, dealing with things like, you know, bisexuality in 1930s New York City. You know, so the character is automatically stated as such. You know, and dealing with sexual violence or not, probably not. And we've got the stats for Vivian Sinclair, and various connections and NPCs as well. Before we have a bibliography and a look at Hardboiled New York. Same again, format. Just examine New York in the 1930s. You know, map. A lot of it will be familiar, of course, because New York has been covered again and again in role-playing and in Call of Cthulhu as well. You know, it's one of the major cities for Call of Cthulhu and Lovecraftian investigative scenarios. Then we have Fatal Consequences, the scenario. Again, I'm not going to show you very much of that. You know, the story so far. Various scenes and so on, all the way down to the end. Again, with the just flipping back. So essentially, with fatal frequencies, problem and edge cards. Then we get Wartime DC featuring Langston Montgomery Wright in capital colour. Now, what's really interesting about this is the fact that there's almost no Call of Cthulhu scenario, I think, that is actually set in Washington DC that you might pass through, but it's a rarely visited city in gaming, despite it being the United States capital. In some ways, you know, other cities like New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles are always viewed as being more interesting and more gameable. But DC during wartime should be an interesting, you know. So first off, of course, we've got the introduction to Langston Montgomery Wright and his stats and associates, NPCs, contacts, enemies, and so on. Looking at the home front, and also the other thing is you generally don't get, you know, the nature of you sort of like gaming and history means that sort of like the home front doesn't get a lot of coverage during World War II. So it's good to see that as well, to explore that in role playing. And the obvious one to do would have been Los Angeles or New York, but again, Washington is really it makes for a different setting. Again, discussion of wartime DC. A guide to DC. You know, this is going to be all new to role playing, to investigative Lovecraftian horror and role playing in general. So you've got the guide to DC of the period. Before we get down to the other thing it does address is the nature of the Jim Crow laws, unfortunately, in the period. Unfortunately, because it's actually, you know, it's going to impede the player character's progress, and affect that, and you know, which is unfortunate. Nice inclusion is the mention of the Green Book, which you may recognise from Lovecraft Country, and then we have capital colour, the scenario, as well as the standard bibliography. So, general structure, story so far, and then of course the scenario itself and the threat, and capital colour is kind of going to give it away with what the threat is there, but that's fine. You know, you play into that, you lean into that as the player character, and the player. We've got a Hepster's dictionary for the period as well, you know, adding more details, and then the appendices gives a quick rule reference, starter notes for experienced gumshoe hands, and then you've got lists of both investigative and general abilities, a handout for new role players, so everything you kind of need, tables for each of the player characters with their sources, so you know, really, you know, useful, and the various tables. And then a guidance on how to solve a case, because the thing is, you know, the challenge of this is to is really you are alone. You're not working with anyone else. You are using your deductive abilities as opposed to your deductive abilities, and everyone else is bouncing ideas off each other. We've got player characters for other mystery genres. So, you know, we have a Miskatonic University professor, an Ordo Veritas agent from Fear itself, or sorry, the esoterrorist setting, unwitting new residents of a haunted house. You know, they're ready to play with the right scenario. Others as well: psychic teenager, mutant cop, licensed autonomous zone effector, laser, which is from Ashen Stars, which is the science fiction investigative role playing from Pelgrane Press, and then Teen Sleuth from GUMSHOE, which is the Teen Sleuth game. I would hook that out and role play that, review that, and then generic edges and the like. So yeah, all there, very nicely presented. You've got full character sheets for each of the 3 player characters at the end, and a blank one. And then the index. And then you have it's just a nice kind of pulp style advert for another case. So yeah, this is Cthulhu Confidential from Pelgrane Press. It's a really, I mean, it is black and white, but it's a really impressive looking book, and it's also really impressive in terms of its content and its its approach to both investigations and the society and culture of the 1930s and wartime America as well. So I'm really quite impressed with that as a package. So yes, that's Cthulhu Confidential from Pelgrane Press. Hope you've enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook. If you have, then please do click on the like button down below. And of course, if you've got any comments or feedback, I do appreciate you taking the time to post those. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to yet more unboxings in the Nook, where you will see me out here with a box containing a book or game, which I will unbox and chat about to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea, then please do click on the subscribe button down below. Thanks again for watching another unboxing in the Nook. I will be back again soon with another one. Bye for now.